morning, and welcome to the North Chapel on this cool but sunny April morning, Sunday morning. So T.S. Eliot says, April is the cruelest month, and Frost writes, the sun was warm but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. The taps have been removed from the trees and the spring flowers are blooming. So I think we can say spring is here. I think we're all ready. Hopefully there'll be no more snow, although I know it's possible for the next 3 weeks. So my name is Mary Blanton, and I'll be your service coordinator today. So one of my favorite guest reflectors is here today, Gwen Groff. Welcome, Gwen. So glad you're here. And our minister, Leon Dunkley, is away this week, but actually he's in the choir. He's checking up on all of us. He's away from the pulpit this week. He'll be back in the pulpit next Sunday. And so the title of Gwen's reflection is Optimism, Pessimism, and Hope. Quite a combination. So I see there are a couple of new people here. Would you be interested in introducing yourself? If not, that's fine. And I see some old faces like Charity, who's here. Welcome. So we now have large print orders of service and of the hymns that are back at the back, and also hearing devices. If you would like any of those, please raise your hand and somebody will bring them to you. And as always, there are many things happening at the North Chapel. This week's order of service is filled with them. Bring your attention to one. Hyannis Sound will be here this afternoon. As Sherry goes, yay. They are wonderful. They're wonderful singing and wonderful stories to go along with it. And I think some of the alums will also be singing with them. So it's lots of fun. So 2 o'clock today. And there are 2 other announcements. One, Tatum.
Good morning. I'm the Director of Spiritual Exploration here, and in 2 weeks we will have a youth service, a service for all generations, where instead of me ferrying the youth downstairs, we'll stay upstairs and we'll do the whole worship together. It's going to be in honor of Earth Day, and I need some help. I invite you to think of a place in nature where growing up you felt safe and comfortable and peaceful. I imagine that many of us have at least one place that comes to mind. If you would be so kind as to either text me, my number is on the order of service, email me, also on the order of service, or just talk to me later today or next week about this place, I would be very grateful as I collect some data for our service in 2 weeks. Thank you.
I wanted to let people know that a group has formed of resistance singers that is offering musical. It's a group that's learning how to sing a number of really beautiful resistance songs. And we've met at the Mennonite Church in Bridgewater, and they're hoping to draw more people to come by having alternating times, meeting twice a month, with the second time in the month being here at our church, because they know we have a big choir and a lot of good voices. And so the first Monday, it's on Thursday evenings at 6:30, and starting on this Thursday, it's going to be held in our church. And I know they've talked to Joanne about the space. Courtney Hollinshead is sort of pulling a lot of this together. But I'm thinking the best space might be, in the parlors, because we usually sit in a circle to learn the songs, and it's just a more comfortable space. But if you can keep in mind the first and third Thursdays at 6:30, I know Megan's participated in it before, and Gwen has, and Anna, you used to do it, and Joby. But at any rate, I just wanted you to be aware of it and know that it's really a nice group of people to get together, and it's collaborating with, I think there's something like 30 or 40 resistance singing groups in the state of Vermont even. And we're meeting up with some of them that had already been together in Norwich, I think, in a week or 2. So anyway, just a heads up.
Thanks, Ann. So we all know now that Tatum is here for spiritual education. And after the service, there will be coffee hour downstairs. There are goodies and the coffee's been made. So it's a wonderful place to come and catch up with people. So please come downstairs that door over here. And last, if you have anything that buzzes, jingles, or beeps, we would appreciate it if you would turn it off. Our April theme is hope. I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the wintertime. This is the chorus from a hymn titled, Come Sing a Song With Me. In thinking about hope, I found these words online. What exactly is hope? People facing difficult situations are often encouraged to stay hopeful. Sometimes it can seem as though being worried and being hopeful are mutually exclusive, that you can't be worried and be hopeful at the same time. Hope is a bit more complex than that. Hope isn't positive thinking or even wishful thinking. In fact, being hopeful actually requires us to first acknowledge that things are difficult. Hope is also about acknowledging that something good might or could happen. In this way, hope might not eradicate your worries, but it can help you from becoming preoccupied with the worst case scenario. I would like to read Amanda Gorman's poem, A Hill We Climb, a poem filled with hope and a call to action. The hill we climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms of notion of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it, and somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to form a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never know defeat again, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up in our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to the glade, the hill we climb. If only we dare. It's because being American is more than pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy, and this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation, every corner of our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
This month's theme, as Mary said, is choosing hope, and the subtitle is a line from a hymn. And I will bring you hope when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the wintertime. That's number 346. Come and sing a song with me. I am not a numbers person, but something about the number 346 was familiar to me. And I remembered looking up number 346 after Diane Mellinger's beautiful reflection here on her last Sunday in the role of choir director. You might remember. In her reflection, Diane told the story about an interim minister that she told she would welcome any of her suggestions of hymns, but there was one hymn that she detests. And she doesn't ever want to use that one. And it's number 346. The interim informed Diane that she loved that song, and they definitely would be singing it. So I looked up 346 then, because I wanted to see what it was about this hymn that was so polarizing. And online I saw that opinions about this song do indeed run strong on both sides. It's a sweet, accessible, comforting song, or it's syrupy drivel with a cloying tune in 3/4 time that sounds like a beer barrel polka. That was quite a while ago. I don't know if y'all sang it during that interim's short tenure, or even if you're singing it this month, when it is the source of the words of hope in April's theme. But when I saw this chosen theme, I thought, this brave community contains multitudes, brave in diversity. Sometimes the hardest diversity to navigate is the different aesthetic preferences in Sunday morning worship services. I see that we're not singing 346 this week, and I didn't see it posted on the hymn board when I watched the recording of last week's sermon, but April has 2 more Sundays to embrace your diversity. One thing I did hear in last week's service was Annie McSood's introduction to the theme of choosing hope. I heard her thanking Jane Hufferdine for articulating these monthly themes and saying, I'm glad she didn't say choosing optimism. And I thought, yes, say more about that. That is what I need. That is what I have been trying to tease apart since I heard this theme. How do we choose hope when it feels impossible to be optimistic? What's the actual difference between optimism and hope? Optimism seems delusional these days, but hope seems absolutely essential. So this morning, I want to simply share with you some voices that I've found helpful. Optimistic voices, pessimistic voices, and hopeful voices. First, I want to say that we can be pessimistic and still be hopeful. Last week, in his first reflection on this theme of choosing hope for Easter, Leon quoted Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it tends toward justice." This familiar, optimistic assertion reminded me of a dissenting voice. Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his beautiful book, Between the World and Me, which he wrote as a letter to his 15-year-old son, growing up Black in America, responds to King's optimism with clear pessimism. Coates writes, "I don't believe in the arc of the universe. I don't believe it bends toward justice. I don't even believe in an arc. I believe in chaos. I believe powerful people who think they can make utopia out of chaos should be watched closely. I don't know that it all ends badly, but I think it probably does." I remember reading that and feeling it as a gut punch. In saying that justice is not inevitable, I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates' intention was to take away hope. I think his intention was to take away complacency. Hope is not believing that everything will be all right in the long run no matter what we do or don't do. That's not hope, that's optimism. In order to be hopeful, we have to be engaged, working for the outcome that we hope for. Whether it's racial justice or the end of all the wars that Linda named in her candle lighting, or the end of misogyny, or heterosexism, or classism, or the end of gun violence, or the survival of the planet. If we're not engaged in working for the world we want to see, it's not hope. And sometimes hope contains a clear-eyed acknowledgement of how hard things are right now and how difficult the struggle will continue to be. I think another example of hopeful pessimism that I think of often is from Bill McKibben. Remember when Bill McKibben was here in March of 2024? He was a bit distracted because he was expecting the birth of his first grandchild at any moment, and we were a bit on edge because we weren't sure till that morning whether he would be with us or in labor and delivery. But he showed up wearing green, as it was St. Patrick's Day. And I remember he talked about the book of Jonah as the oldest environmentalist text. And he told us about his work with young people. And he looked at us, our mostly graying heads, and assured us that there are also some advantages of being older and having resources of time and skills and connections to use in the service of political action. He was very hopeful. But my clearest memory was from the Q&A session. Someone asked what he thought of Elon Musk. Bill McKibben especially said, "I'm not a fan." He said that electric cars notwithstanding, Musk supports candidate Trump, and this earth is so vulnerable it simply will not survive a second Trump presidency. That is gut-wrenchingly pessimistic, especially in light of the fact that a few months later, candidate Trump once again became President Trump. And yet I think we would all agree that McKibben's message was a message of hope. And he continues to choose hope. His message qualifies as hope because he continues to be engaged. Despite dire predictions from scientists and bad decisions from politicians, he keeps working. The essence of hope is engagement. When there's engagement, hope can hold pessimism alongside optimism. Another thing that I think distinguishes hope from optimism is that hope tends to flourish in community rather than in isolation. The writer and activist Rebecca Solnit recalls sitting with Bill McKibben on a concrete floor at an activist space during the Paris Climate Treaty process. Somebody walked up and asked him a question that he gets all the time. What's the best thing that I can do as an individual? And he said, stop being an individual. You have to have solidarity. When you act with others. Community is where we experience hope. I am an extreme introvert. I am not a natural public activist type at all. I read and think and pray and write and walk and sew mostly alone. But I feel hopeful when I'm standing with our little singing resistance group that Anne mentioned. It's a small group of people, some of whom I know, some I don't, making signs and carrying signs, some I agree with and some I don't, singing simple songs, some I like and some I don't. Hope is nurtured in diverse community. I remember when I came back from Virginia last summer, I eventually realized that I need community. I have individual friends, but I didn't have a community, people who gather regularly and show up for each other, not because they like each other, but because they're committed to the same hopeful visions. People who sing together and pray together and laugh together and cry together and argue together. And hope is nurtured in memory, in storytelling, in history. This is the long arc of the moral universe that King and Parker described. Maybe its bend toward justice is not inevitable. Maybe we actually have to bend it, but we do have to look at it. We have to recognize how long it is, and we have to tell its long story. One of the most hopeful voices that I've been enjoying recently is Rebecca Solnit's. She's like my new best friend that I know I need. She's the writer who, in the 80s, coined the term mansplaining after a man explained her own book to her at a party. And the man persisted, even when someone told him that the woman he was talking to was the writer of the book that he was explaining. There's a wonderful interview with Solnit in the Guardian. In it, she says, hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable. It's an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will be fine with or without our involvement, and pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. Hope is the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter are not things that we can know beforehand. We may not know them afterward either, she says. History is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. Solnit's most recent book is called The Beginning Comes After the End. And that's the essence of her argument for choosing hope. We must keep starting up again. She says, some things just can't be extinguished once they've been enlivened. A government can take away your rights, but no one can take away your belief in those rights, and they will come back. Solnit lifts up stories of progress and reminds us that what the far right is doing now globally is actually backlash. She says a new world is being born, and they're basically trying to abort it, which is a little ironic given their views on abortion. She says, I tell these stories to encourage people to see how far we've come, with the hope that the evidence will make the case that the work is well worth continuing. She quotes theologian Walter Brueggemann, who said, hope arises from memory. You can turn that inside out, she says, and say that despair arises from forgetting. If you forget that every good thing we have came about as the result of a heroic struggle, you will despair. Of course you will. But the right for women to be treated as people and have a voice is the result of a heroic struggle. Radical equality, far from perfectly achieved, but to the extent which it has been achieved against racism, is the result of a heroic struggle. When it comes to the environment, often our victories look like nothing. The river that wasn't dammed or is no longer polluted, the forest that wasn't cut down, the species that didn't go extinct. They're nothing. You cannot see them, but they were the result of a historic struggle. And to know that is to know that we have tremendous power. All these advances are contingent on actually showing up and doing the work. Nothing is inevitable. Optimism and pessimism both assume we know the future and therefore nothing is required of us. But the future is radically uncertain and therefore much is required of us. But she says, you can't weather it on your own. One of the beautiful, profound things, she says, that I've seen over and over is that in those moments of uprising, there is a sense of power and belonging that transforms people. The solidarity, the sense of purpose and interconnectedness, the bonds forged in activism, those friendships, the energy, the self-awareness and the ambition created by political action, they stay with you for the rest of your life. Solnit uses the metaphor of mushrooms. She says, after a rain, mushrooms appear on the surface of the earth as if from nowhere. They come from a vast underground fungus that remains invisible and largely unknown. What we call mushrooms, mycologists call the fruiting body of the larger, less visible fungus. Uprisings are often considered to be spontaneous, but they are the less visible long-term organizing groundwork or the underground work that has laid the foundation. Perhaps Solnit's most important point is that what comes after a revolutionary change, a victory, isn't a destination, but a starting point for recommitment and continual nourishment of our fledgling ideals. A victory doesn't mean that everything is now going to be nice and we can therefore go lounge around. Some activisms, she says, are afraid that if we acknowledge victory, people will give up the struggle. She says, I've long been more afraid that people will give up and go home or never get started in the first place if they think that no victory is possible, or if they fail to recognize the victories already achieved. Marriage equality isn't the end of homophobia, but it's something to celebrate. A victory is a milestone on the road. It is evidence that sometimes we win. It's encouragement to keep going, to not stop. It is always too soon to go home. Solnit is a rower, and she offers a final metaphor. She says, you row forward looking back. Telling our history is part of helping people navigate toward the future, looking back. The past can become a torch where we can carry light into the night that is the future. I'd like to leave you with your hymn. Hope is the song of love and the rose in the wintertime. Hope is that underlying reality that says we know, we've experienced, that we are all one. We are all connected in love, and love is stronger than death. All shall be well. In the Christian tradition, we have that absurd promise from Julian of Norwich, who was an anchoress in the 14th century. Julian was overcome by an unknown illness, and she nearly died. In the midst of her illness and recovery, she had a series of visions that she called revelations of divine love. Her most comforting illumination is the most helpful and hopeful. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. It sounds almost like meaningless optimism until you realize that she said this at a time when her world was going through the plague, the Black Death, which killed about 50% of the European population. Her country was in the midst of the 100-Year War, and her church was in the midst of a schism, and she personally was on what all assumed was her deathbed. In the midst of all of that, she affirmed, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Doesn't mean circumstances are improving. It means that there is a level beneath the chaos that we're living with, and that at that level, all is love. She wrote of her divine visions, love was his meaning. Who showed it to you? Love. Why did he show it to you? For love. If Julian's archaic language is too masculine or too theistic for you, I invite you to hear a similar promise from John Lennon. He said, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end.
The closing words are by Dr. Jane Goodall. Optimism says everything will be fine. Pessimism says nothing will work out. Hope, on the other hand, has no uncertainties. It is the dogged determination to do what is in our power to make the better future we wish for to actually happen. May it be so.